March 30th of this year was a fateful day for the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, as the publisher decided to go ahead and release number 93 of their latest Spider-Man series. This chapter was the end of the Beyond saga that saw Peter Parker and Ben Reilly come to blows after a mysterious company known as the Beyond Corporation organized several misdeeds in the back of the story. Since the publication of that installment, writer Zeb Wells and artist John Romita Jr. started their Amazing Spider-Man run, but they left the plot threads of both Ben Reilly and Chasm behind. Today, with the Amazing Spider-Man number 14, Zeb Wells and his collaborators have returned to pick up the pieces of what has been happening behind the scenes of Chasm and Ben Reilly since the beginning of the Amazing Spider-Man. My name is Ariko Braddock, and today let's go ahead and dive deep into the Amazing Spider-Man number 14 to see how the beginning of Dark Web is starting to be spun. But before we get deeper into the issue, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our content and want to go ahead and support us. Without further ado, I want to kick this review off by reading the solicitation text that Marvel created for this landmark Spider-Man issue. Dark Web Prelude. We haven't seen Chasm since Amazing Spider-Man 894 and the free comic book day issue. But that doesn't mean he hasn't been busy. Join us for this very special issue featuring Spidey's most dangerous new villain, as well as the Goblin Queen, and a brand new villain you won't believe. And you can trust me when I say that none of this is hyperbole, as I'm going to introduce this really vast creative team behind this prelude issue for the Dark Web of Amazing Spider-Man. So this issue is written by Zeb Wells. The illustrations are done by Michael Dowling, Kyle Hotz, Terry Dodson, and Ryan Stegman. We have colors from Richard Isanove, Dan Brown, and Matt Hollingsworth. Inks from Rachel Dodson, Tim Townsend, and JP Mayer. The issue's cover is illustrated by John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Marcio Menyz. So without further ado here, I want to go ahead and show off the cover from John Romita Jr., introducing the prelude to the Dark Web event. And real quick, big thank you to Adventures in Poor Taste for always posting these comic book previews so quickly for the series. And I want to show off some of the interior art as well for the issue. Now, talking about the interior art, it's going to be a little complicated because there were multiple interior artists for this issue, but I actually think that this works in the series' favor, as the issue starts changing its tone repeatedly throughout the publication. So the first set of art that we get here is from Michael Dowling in the first story called Spring. We don't have any pencils from Michael Dowling in the preview that we have from Adventures in Poor Taste, but I do want to take a few moments and say that Dowling's art is gorgeous. Dowling does a wonderful job drawing all the expressions on the individual characters and making them seem interesting. Zeb Wells writes quite the script for this particular installment, so Dowling does a good job keeping up with some of the writing from Wells throughout this particular issue. Now, this second story called Summer is what we're taking a look at as far as the pencils go. These pencils are from Kyle Hotz. If you notice, they are fairly dark, especially when we compare, these pencils to Dowling or Terry Dodson. However, I still think that these pencils work incredibly well for the story because of the really dark nature of basically Chasm and how this series came to be. Also, this issue is really focused on fleshing out some of the mechanics behind Dark Web as opposed to starting Dark Web. So by the time this issue ends, you're going to feel essentially all ready to read the crossover as long as you've been able to follow all of kind of like the individual plot threads here. And I think that this issue does a wonderful job kind of introducing, Limbo as well as Madeline Pryor that we can see on this page. This storyline, the dark web storyline in Amazing Spider-Man, has a dark fantasy type of twist to it. So getting Kyle Hotz in this context really shows me that Spider-Man's editorial knows what they're doing and has a lot of intention, behind the artists that they're assigning to the various chapters of the story. Seeing, Terry and Rachel Dodson's art in a comic book like this is strange at first. But when you consider how good the Dodsons are at the facial expressions, you start understanding how they could fit into a story with a dark fantasy aesthetic. And I really came to appreciate the way that the Dodsons were able to render and kind of draw Madeline Pryor in particular. I think they do a good job taking all of kind of the dark subtext behind this character and pushing it to the forefront while still making it look aesthetically pleasing. The level of cognitive dissonance that we get from the Dodsons is just beautiful throughout this issue. Now, we finished things up with the last artist on our list. This is Ryan Stegman. This is also kind of continuing the dark fantasy nature of the issue. Personally, I think Ryan Stegman's art is some of the weakest in the series, as Stegman is trying to seemingly toe a line between the dark art of Hotz and the beautiful, more streamlined art of the Dodsons. But I don't think we quite strike a balance that makes Stegman's art look unique or stand out from some of the collaborators. That being said, there's still some really beautiful pages, from all of these artists throughout the issue. And I think Marvel's editorial did a good job dividing and kind of conquering them as the issue or segment of the series called for it. Now, at this point in the review, you might be asking me, how is author Zeb Wells' script for the issue? And I can tell you that it's just wonderful. Watching Zeb Wells confidently connect all of these narrative pieces that have been kind of stagnant and, scattered throughout the Marvel universe is just cathartic in this issue. Watching him, arrange and figure out how to slot Ben Reilly and Madeline Pryor together is part of the fun of this issue. And for me, the big surprise of this issue, which is actually going to be exemplified by this page that we're looking at, was Janine, Ben Reilly's, romantic interest. I thought Janine had some really beautiful characterization in this issue that fleshed her out to an extremely advanced degree. And it was so interesting to read about her intentions and the way that her motivations changed throughout the issue. I think that was the biggest success of the comic book as a whole and got me really excited about a different plot thread of dark web than I expected to enjoy in the first place. So overall here, I think this is an incredible issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. It makes me feel so reassured that this isn't just a kind of plot-focused first event from Marvel. This is an event that has been seeded so carefully by so many comic books across the Spider-Man and X-Men lines that this is a more logical event that will see some really strong climactic battles. There is no way that when Chasm and Peter Parker, as Spider-Man reunite for a big battle, that it's not going to seem big and it's not going to seem epic because of all these absences and the mechanics of the plot in the story. There is so much depth to Zeb Wells' Spider-Man run. Now is the time to jump on right before Dark Web starts in earnest. I recommend going back and checking out the Amazing Spider-Man Beyond story and then getting caught up with our current run of Amazing Spider-Man. Also, there are a couple of these plot threads that are currently being fleshed out in the Venom series by Al Ewing, Ram V, and Brian Hitch. Reading that storyline and then jumping into Dark Web will get you an even deeper appreciation of everything we've talked about today. Overall, I am so happy with The Amazing Spider-Man 14. I think Marvel has done so many things right, and the kind of animosity that they've built up between Chasm and Madeline Pryor is so, kind of palpable for me to sense here. And I can't wait to see how this is all going to pay off in the greater Marvel universe. Well, thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I'll be back very soon for another excellent Marvel video. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Bye.